The president is speaking at this hour in Atlanta. President Biden and Vice President Harris traveling to Georgia today, meeting with Asian American leaders, community leaders in the wake of the deadly shootings that killed 8 people, including 6 victims of Asian descent. Let's listen to the president.
Thank you and good afternoon. Sorry a little late, but we had an opportunity to meet with leaders of the AAPI community downstairs, and it was heart-wrenching to listen to them. As many of you know, we originally planned to hold a car rally to thank our supporters. But given the recent days, events of the recent days, we didn't feel it was appropriate. So we canceled that rally. But we want our supporters to know we'll come back and hold that rally another trip. But today, we want to speak about something else. I said from the beginning of my campaign for president that we needed to come together, that we needed to unite as one people, one nation, one America. I said in my kickoff speech in Philadelphia, I said that very same thing when I spoke at Gettysburg. I said that in my inaugural address. And I believe with every fiber on my being, there are simply some core values and beliefs that should bring us together as Americans. One of them is standing together against hate, against racism, the ugly poison that has long haunted and plagued our nation. The Vice President and I, as I said, met a little bit earlier, just before this, with leaders from the Asian American community here in Georgia. We talked about Tuesday's mass shooting, about another example of public health crisis of gun violence in this country. 8 people killed, 7 women, 6 were of Asian descent. All fellow Americans, each one of them we mourn. Their families are left with broken hearts and unanswered questions. And the investigation is ongoing, and the Vice President and I are being regularly updated by the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI, working closely with Governor Kemp and Mayor Bottoms and local officials. But whatever the motivation, we know this: too many Asian Americans have been walking up and down the streets and worrying, waking up each morning the past year feeling their safety and the safety of their loved ones are at stake. They've been attacked, blamed, scapegoated, and harassed. They've been verbally assaulted, physically assaulted, killed. Documented incidents of hate against Asian Americans have seen a skyrocketing spike over the last year, let alone the ones that happened and never get reported. It's been a year of living in fear for their lives, just to walk down the street. Grandparents are afraid to leave their homes. Small business owners targeted and gunned down. Attacks on some of the most vulnerable people in our nation, the elderly, low-wage workers, and women. In fact, Asian American women suffer twice as many incidents of harassment and violence as Asian American men. We're learning again what we've always known: words have consequences. It's the coronavirus, full stop. The conversation we had today with the AAPI leaders, and that we're hearing all across the country, is that hate and violence often hide in plain sight. It's often met with silence. That's been true throughout our history. But that has to change, because our silence is complicity. We cannot be complicit. We have to speak out. We have to act. In my first week in office, I signed an executive order directing federal agencies to combat this resurgence of xenophobia. The Department of Justice is strengthening its partnership with the AAPI community to prevent these crimes, in addition to its other work to take on violent extremists and domestic terrorism. I'm calling on Congress to pass and get to my desk the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And the House just passed the reauthorization for the Violence Against Women Act. a law I authored more than 25 years ago. That's one of my proudest legislative achievements. I call on the Senate to swiftly pass it and get it to my desk. But for all the good that laws can do, we have to change our hearts. Hate can have no safe harbor in America. It must stop. And it's on all of us together, to make it stop.
President Biden
Something
there in
else.
Atlanta saying hate can have no place in America. It's up to all of us to make it stop. Talking about the 8
Science
dead,
isn't something
6 of
that you
Asian
buy.
descent, all of them we mourn, he said.
political about it.
And he went out of his way to say, whatever the motivation, too many Asian Americans have been walking our streets, waking up in the morning and worrying. They have been verbally attacked and killed. And he talked about the skyrocketing spike in cases, attacks on Asian Americans in this country, which we've been reporting on now for many weeks here. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, also addressing this moments ago.
Whatever the killer's motive, these facts are clear. 6 out of the 8 people killed on Tuesday night were of Asian descent. 7 were women. The shootings took place in businesses owned by Asian Americans. The shootings took place as violent hate crimes and discrimination against Asian Americans has risen dramatically over the last year and more.
Vice President Harris saying racism is real in America. It always has been. Sexism, too, she said. She said Asians have been attacked and scapegoated. And she said for the last year, people with the most powerful pulpit have been speaking and spreading hate. Let's bring in ABC's Steve Osunsami, who's been covering this story all week long for us in Atlanta. Steve, we know the names of all the victims have now been revealed. Among them, a devoted single mom, a newlywed mom, an Army veteran. I know this has shaken Atlanta. It's shaken the country.
It has. There are Asian Americans here in this city, in this county, in the county to the north of us, where one of these shootings, these killings happen. Across the state, Asian Americans across this country who are watching these events are all terrified, frightened, and even angered by what has happened here and the increase in attacks against Asian Americans in this country. And many people of all colors are having trouble understanding the line that we're hearing from police that this was the result of a sex addiction and that this alleged gunman was targeting these businesses because of that. It's really hard for people to process that with everything that's going on. You know, there is a lot of mistrust here in particular directed towards the police in the suburbs who currently are holding the alleged gunman in custody. Complete mistrust, lots of work on the part of law enforcement. I will point out that I spoke with the police chief of Atlanta, a different law enforcement agency, and he wants Asian Americans in this city to know that if they call his department, he will answer and that he is here to protect this community. David.
But no question, a lot of work ahead. Steve, our thanks to you. And one more question on this before we go. I want to turn to Eva Pilgrim because we heard from both President Biden and Vice President Harris there, regardless of motivation. They made it very clear, regardless of what the criminal definition is of what this suspect did, the numbers are the facts here, and they're very telling about attacks and assaults on Asian Americans in this country.
Exactly right. The numbers, they're up 150%. Asian hate crimes, 150%. And I can tell you, Asian Americans are scared. They are very scared. And no matter what they discover in this case from a criminal perspective, many Asian Americans already believe this was a hate crime.
All right, Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you following this every step of the way here with us as well. We're going to continue our coverage on ABC News Live, abcnews.com as well. I'll see you shortly with the entire team on World News Tonight. And then later tonight here, a special edition of 2020 Murder in Atlanta, and more of this much needed conversation across this country, what we've witnessed this week and the work ahead. That's tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here. I'm David Muir in New York. For many of you, we return to local news, and I'll see you on World News Tonight. Good night.
This has been a special report from ABC News.